Hello and welcome back. My name is Catherine Chapman and you're watching PrivSec Global, the February edition. On behalf of PrivSec Global, I would like to thank our headline sponsor OneTrust and our headline media partner, The Wall Street Journal, as well as all of our other sponsors and partners for their continued support of this program. That's people like Privacy Culture, PKware, Process Unity, and our other media partner, Privacy Rules. To learn more about these organizations and our other sponsors and partners, head over to the menu bar on the left of your conference platform, where you can access exclusive content, advice, and much, much more. There you can also register for sessions, even if you don't plan to attend live, in order to access all the content on demand, but later at your leisure. Also through that conference platform, please do connect and network with peers through the chat and people functions, and also visit the PrivSec library for a range of ebooks, webinars, and on-demand discussions. That's a resource that you don't want to miss out on. And most importantly, engage with our sessions. That means ask questions, clap, join in on the discussion. PrivSec Global would really be nothing without your involvement, so do help us steer the conversation over the next 2 days. It is now time for our next session. As we all know, since the beginning of COVID-19, businesses have gone through an accelerated digitalization, at the expense, however, of privacy and security. But even for the businesses with the right resources in place, the importance of data privacy has gone beyond just compliance, as awareness around privacy has risen and become critical for customer trust and transparency. This next panel, which has kindly been sponsored by Mine, will explore how data privacy has become a key part of a company's reputation and brand trust, and discover the gaps in our current privacy tech solutions marketplace. It is my great pleasure to introduce the session host. It's Rob Bateman. He's the analyst and research director at GRC World Forums. Rob, great to see you. If you're coming up on screen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Catherine. Always good to see you too for that introduction. So yes, today we are talking about the need for a no-code, automated, and easy to implement privacy solution. I'm Robert Bateman, as mentioned, analyst and research director here at GRC World Forums and your host for this session. Now, Catherine mentioned there that since COVID started, businesses have gone through a very fast process of moving online or accelerating their digitization processes. Part of moving online has meant that many newer companies don't have the right processes, resources, or expertise in place to think about privacy and security. So to talk about how businesses can automate some of their privacy compliance needs, I'm going to be joined by Gal Rengel, who is co-founder and CEO at Mine, Mireia Martinez Campo, who is head of legal and international privacy lead. Mireia, I don't have your name, but you'll tell us about that in a moment. Shama Iqbal, who is lead privacy lawyer for the UK at Bumble, and Darius Fahamifar, who is a privacy program manager at Stripe. So before we get to the first questions, I'm just going to ask you each to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about yourselves. If we could start with you, please, Gal.
Very much, Robert. So I'm a co-founder and my background is.
I'm not sure if anyone else is having audio issues there. Gal, there's something up with your audio, so we'll come back to you if that's okay.
Yeah,
just
same
ask
issue.
The others to introduce themselves. Mireia, perhaps you could tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk and to share my experience and my concerns with all of you. Thank you very much. And yes, a little bit about me. I'm a lawyer. I work as a lawyer for a company. I'm the responsible I'm the responsible for all the privacy issues we have in all countries. Some of them are in European countries, and some of them abroad, outside the European Union. And yeah, I'm specialized in everything related to GDPR.
Thank you, Mireia. And Darius, could you go next? Please tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Yep, sure. So I'm a privacy program manager at Stripe, primarily working with privacy operations, so leading up to privacy legal and privacy engineering. So operationalizing and automating our privacy workflows within Stripe for robust privacy programs. Previously, I've worked with 4 companies in privacy teams like Spotify, actually worked for OneTrust as well. I first started my journey into data privacy in 2016 when I was working on a breach incident program for GDPR at Lloyds Bank. So been in privacy for a few years now.
Thank you, Darius. A wealth of experience then. And Shama, could you go next, please?
Hello, I'm Shama. I'm the lead UK privacy lawyer for Bumble Group. Prior to joining Bumble, I held data protection advisory roles with AstraZeneca and also PwC, and I specialize in really anything that is UK or EU GDPR related, and dabble a bit beyond that as well.
Thanks, Shama. Now, Gail, let's try again. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your work at Mine?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Oh, that's much better. You did sound very strange before.
I don't know what happened. So thank you very much, Robert, and nice to be here with everyone. My name is Gal Ringel. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Mine. My background is 15 years in cybersecurity engineering, quite long service in the Israeli intelligence forces. And after that, I spent for 4.5 years as a venture capital investor for 2 US corporates, Nielsen Ventures, the market research company, and then Verizon Ventures, the US telco. I had the opportunity to invest in 22 amazing startups, and I led the worldwide cybersecurity investments there. And now with Mine, we are powering individuals and companies around anything that is related to privacy regulations and privacy operations. For individuals, we help them be more safe online and manage their personal data on an ongoing basis. We just passed 1 million users. And for companies, we help them automate any kind of privacy operations, and we're going to touch that during this discussion.
Thank you, Gail. That's great. So we're talking today about implementing a no-code privacy automation solution. Perhaps, Gail, you could start us off with this. What is a no-code automation solution in a privacy context?
Sure. So coming from the security space, there is a growing trend for the last 2 years of automating the entire security operations. And the way to do it is by using a no-code and plug-and-play ideas of connecting different systems and connecting different daily operations. And same goes to the privacy space right now. So after interviewing hundreds of companies, we learned that privacy operations is really scattered into many different silos, and the amount of effort and challenges that companies have to go through in order to meet with different privacy regulations and different daily operations is growing like massively. And the idea of no-code privacy solutions is taking all the manual tasks that companies has to do around DSR handling, for example, around data mapping, about ROPA, about essentially any manual task that legal teams, support team, and R&D teams has to go through to meet with privacy regulations and make them no code, in a sense that privacy teams could use it as a plug and play without any R&D needed to write code and integrate that within their current systems. And the idea is that companies can implement a faster privacy program within a few hours rather than going through a long implementation time of heavy privacy solutions.
Thank you, Gail. So now Shama and Mireia, I understand you're both working privacy legal professionals. Maybe you could tell us a bit about your day-to-day work. What is it that you do manually? What's automated? Are there any kind of pain points, annoying, inefficient sort of tasks that you have to do day to day? Could we maybe start with you, please, Sharma? Tell us a bit about your work at Bumble in this context.
Sure, definitely. So I think across the roles that I've had, there's a lot of routine work. By that I mean just human manual work. And the areas that I would pick out that are most resource intensive, that are sort of top of mind across the organizations I've been at, probably DSARS, data subject access requests, and also I think privacy impact assessments and legitimate interest assessments. Those have become more important under GDPR. So anything involving factual documentation of a processing activity, and then an assessment of the impact and the risks for data subjects. And then more recently, things like transfer impact assessments as a consequence of Schrems. Again, heavy documentation involved, and you don't seem to be able to get away from these things. I think there's been guidance recently on data subject access requests, and also on the transfer impact assessments, that definitely confirm, you have to do these things case by case. So that is individual assessments for data subject access requests. That means tailored responses, based on the type of right that's being exercised. So yeah, those things I think continue to occupy us as privacy professionals. And largely from the organizations I've seen, there is a heavy manual side to that.
Yeah.
Definitely. And if you think about subject access requests, it's almost an analysis of, sometimes the individual is not very clear about the right they're exercising. You have to help them figure it out. They don't have to specify that. They don't have to specify a legal basis. It's not just about issuing a file of data as well. They have rights to information about the processing, and your job as a lawyer is there to help them understand the lawfulness of the processing. So there's information you have to provide around the data. You have to be careful about how you handle that. And you have to be careful about things like, causing a data breach. Is the person entitled to the information they're requesting? Do you need to do verification and things like that? So yeah, it's quite a lot of input from the lawyer.
Yes, indeed. So there's a lot of quite sensitive and intricate work there, I suppose, Sharma. And Maria, could you tell us a bit about your work at Glover? What do you find yourself doing kind of routinely as part of your job?
Sorry, I was mute. Yes, I actually completely agree with Shama regarding the full amount of work we have to manage all the data subject requests, the data privacy impact assessments we have to do on our daily basis, the legitimate assessment, and I would add also the ROPA, also the privacy registers, with the tracking of all the processes we need to have in our organizations. That's also something very, very complicated for us. But aside from that, we have also another complication, which is when you have to do all of this for each country where you are, when you have to deal with in an international company, and you are responsible for the privacy for the whole company. It's nice, okay, you have all your data subject request management from headquarters, their privacy assessments, their privacy register, but then you have to do all of these tasks. You have to replicate the tasks for the countries, and that's like another workload, an amazing workload we need to have, and it has to be consistent also with what you are doing from headquarters. And sometimes it's not easy to be consistent when you are talking about who is the controller of this data, personal data, who is not the controller. And And yeah, that's one of the another complication I wanted to add to the Shama, what Shama already said. And I have a question for Guy regarding the no code what you were talking about. I'm very curious about because like for example with the data subject request, I don't know how can you were saying that it's we can have this kind of I don't know, tools or solutions implemented with no code or with not big implementation. And I'm curious about how can you do that, for instance, with a data subject request? How can you delete data in and my panel, my systems without a huge implementation? Because I don't know how can you do that. I don't know if you can answer now or later when.
So that's
Yeah.
so let's bring Gal in. I do want to bring Darius in soon, but Gal, if you'd like to
Sorry.
respond to Maria there, that's great.
Yeah, sure. I can answer that very shortly. So regarding DSAR specifically, the way we did it in a no-code approach is by implementing more than 200 different integrations, so API integrations to all of the data sources and third parties that you can think of. So imagine we have integration to all of the CRM systems like Salesforce and HubSpot and Outreach and email marketing and product analytics, and essentially any place you keep your customers' PII. And when you want to use our these API integrations, it's essentially how we implemented that in 3 clicks for you as a customer to interact with or to connect one time to each of these data sources. And once you are connected to all of the places that you keep your customers' data, anytime that you receive a new privacy request into your organization, you can see in real time using these API integrations how many records you have in each place. And then you can decide whether you want to use how we call it a cruise control and just click, I want to delete from all the places, or you want to have some sort of a semi-manual approach where you can say, okay, from these data sources, I want to delete regarding that case, and from these sources I don't. And same goes to data access requests. So you can see in real time where the data flows from all the systems instead of writing these codes yourself. So this is how we solved the DSAR and essentially any data privacy request using API integrations to any data source that you keep your customers' data.
Thank you, Gal. So that's a great answer. And Darius, now you, of course, are a data protection professional yourself working at Stripe, but you've had a lot of experience in previous roles helping companies to implement these software platforms that assist with compliance. So in your experience, what are the kind of benefits that automation can bring, and what shape do those benefits take when we're talking about, for example, DSARs, or perhaps moving on to stuff like ROPAs, the record of processing, legitimate interests assessments? Do you think there's a place for automation in some of these other day-to-day processes for privacy professionals, and what benefits have you seen automation platforms bring?
Yeah, so from my previous experience, at OneTrust and implementing solutions for companies, ideally, privacy by design is a big point, which is mentioned in Article 25 of the GDPR legislation. And a lot of people think that when you're engineering privacy requirements, that is a lot of effort. So they default to no-code solutions. And sometimes it's actually the other way around. It's reverse engineering. Some of the work you need to do to become compliant can be a lot of work. So no-code automated solutions really do help from building a foundation for privacy by design, primarily maybe for new companies and startups, which I've experienced working with. And once you automate that level, you have your different program areas like ROPA, DSAR, you've had that privacy by design foundation built from the ground up. It becomes a lot more accessible and a lot more cost saving. People think privacy is a preventative measure and we prevent risks, but there is cost savings involved. I think the average DSAR for a large organization costs around about $3,000 per request. And that's usually probably on the basis where they have to reverse engineer or manually review those data subject access requests. So on the flip side, if you're implementing privacy by design by a foundation for a no-code tool, you're really setting yourself up for success instead of failure. You know, prevention is better than cure in this sort of situation.
So you're talking there about kind of implementing the system for responding to subject access requests early in the process, as it was. You don't need to reverse engineer the request. You've got your data set up so that it's easy to respond, and you can do so in an automated or semi-automated sort of way. Gal, do you want to say a few words on that? You've already explored it a bit in your answer to Mireia. How does it kind of work? You know, what are the main elements of automation as they apply to these different sorts of privacy requests and processes?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Darius, and this is what we see when we speak with different companies. When we approach to solving the problem of automating different daily privacy operations, we interviewed more than 1,000 companies to really understand how they handle any kind of different daily task regarding privacy, and to really learn what are the gaps. And on the other end, since we are coming from the consumer side as well, and we have more than 1 million users who have interacted with different privacy regulations, we also interviewed more than 15,000 users in the sense of how they interacted with different companies. And once we learned the two sides of that equation, we came and really, designed the right product for companies in order to help them. And the basic thing that we have started with, or the fundamentals, is exactly what Darius said. So the basic thing that we help companies is to do what we define, or what the market defines as data mapping. So to put the underlying infrastructure of identifying all the data sources, it can be a database, it can be a third party that the company is using. And we mentioned COVID-19 and the rapid digitalization. Companies added, hundreds of new third parties to the organization, and it was very hard to keep track. So the basic fundamental that we help companies is to do data mapping, and in real time to keep track of all the different data sources and the exact PII that they keep in each one of the systems. And on top of that, we started to build different modules that can help with any kind of daily operation. So if we talk about DSRs, we always add new APIs into the system. So if our data mapping capabilities uncover the new data source that the company is using, they can use the data catalog to plug a new API into it, and they can start using that in a matter of minutes. Same goes to what Shama mentioned regarding verification and validations of the individuals. One of the things that we learned from the consumer side is that companies usually ask the individual, the data subject, whether he wants to exercise his GDPR rights or CCPA rights. And when you go to the average person, it doesn't know GDPR or CCPA. So that creates a lot of back and forth with individuals and companies to just try to communicate on the same language, which is very hard. So just to wrap up, again, we put the fundamentals of data mapping, which also powered ROPA report later on. We then add the DSR capabilities with dozens of APIs. And essentially, we also help companies do the ROPA in an ongoing basis instead of questionnaires and spreadsheets. And those three pillars, as far as we understand, and we would love to hear the other panelists, how do they see it in their day-to-day. But when we think about these three areas, we understood that right now, these are the top 3 pains that companies are having in terms of dealing with the new regulations.
Well, could you, Gail, what are the 3 areas? And I'll ask Mireia and Shama to come back on that.
Data mapping and PII tracing, DSR handling, and ROPA report, how to keep track of all the records of processing activities.
So what do you think about that, or any of the three of you really? The data matching processes, DSARs, and the ROPA. This is the record of processing which activities, which I find to be particularly unpopular among many compliance professionals. I mean, are these things that you find tedious or difficult? Perhaps thinking about data mapping first of all. Sharma, you've unmuted. Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I've actually seen in some organizations this set up in a manual way, but quite successfully. And the way they've done that is by just centralizing the record. So have one record for your entire business, but then distribute the responsibility. So because it's factual, largely the ROPA, right? So who has that knowledge? It's the business people. So I think they should be charged with that responsibility to assist you in completing that record. Obviously, you still need the legal oversight, and I think that's really important. But I think you can do it by centralization and then distribution of responsibility. And you need to support that with training as well and education so that they understand the importance of the ROPA and the need to keep it up to date. But I have seen it done manually without too much headache. That's all I will say on that.
So this would be a kind of centralized spreadsheet or something like that with individual departments responsible for.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
A simple it can be an Excel. And you know, as a new processing activity emerges, you just go in and you just put in a new field describing that new processing operation. And that again, sits with business.
So I'll go to Darius now, someone who's got perhaps some experience like Gal of moving people from the so-called sort of old-fashioned way of doing things to the more automated, software-based approach. Are there any kind of particularly difficult areas in doing that you find common across different companies? What are the kind of challenges in doing that?
Yeah, so particularly when it comes to maybe working with engineering teams, fulfilling those privacy requirements can kind of build a larger overhead. So the biggest issue, which I imagine a lot of people working with privacy teams, is the general kind of pushback. And when the pushback comes and you have to want to maybe build something internally, that can also pose problems when we're not moving away, when we're not adopting automated solutions. So I've been in companies where we built our own internal privacy solution, which is great and saves kind of overhead in the short term. But in the long term, when it comes to maintaining it and updating it, that's where the engineers kind of become a bottleneck. So that kind of initial pushback and the bypass of automated solutions has sometimes been an issue in getting kind of buy-in from the internal stakeholders. So kind of new ways of working using automated solutions can kind of have pushback from engineers. And also I would say interdependencies. So I think and going back on Gal's point, saying about there's the three pillars that struggle the most within privacy programs. Fundamentally, I would kind of say it's more. I think all areas of data privacy regulation can be difficult, and I don't think enough emphasis is put on interdependencies between different programs. So if you focus really on making sure you have your ROPA in place, that's really going to automatically complete your privacy policy where you list your sub-processors and stuff, and that kind of solution in itself is already kind of one of the pain points there, just going back to the previous point, is fulfilling, say, additional DSAR requests with more information and having to get people to kind of fill that out. Implementing an automated solution to recover that can sometimes be a bit difficult to help achieve that goal.
Okay, sure. And so a bit of some resistance then sometimes from some people within the team over transforming part of the program. Gal, is there anything you want to add on that before we move on to the next question, your experience?
Maybe one last comment regarding Darius' point, which is very accurate regarding the resistance from R&D teams or the relationship between legal teams and R&D, which usually R&D are not really understands the legal sides of how to handle the different privacy regulations. And from what we see in the market, privacy teams are not backed with a lot of money in the P&L like security teams, right? So another reason for doing no code solutions is to really help privacy teams to really accelerate the amount of efforts and activities that they can achieve in an automated way without having to prioritize R&D resources to do that. So this is also something that we're seeing in the different companies in all sizes. Even the most big companies usually have a small privacy team. So I think this is another thing to take into consideration.
Thank you, Gal. Now, Maria, I saw you nodding your head there at the mention of sort of budgetary constraints on privacy teams. Now, there are some things, I guess, you guys working in data protection, particularly in Europe, are being asked to do a lot right now, particularly with Schrems 2 having taken place a couple of years ago. Regulators really getting very busy on things like international transfers, and the job's getting very complicated. Are there any things that you would consider that you would be hesitant really to automate too much that are quite, you've mentioned complex DSARs, are there any other kind of areas that you feel require manual inputs from your perspective?
Yes, following a little bit with what Gal was saying, this mix with the tech teams and the legal teams, something it's important, especially for legal teams, for lawyers or privacy in companies, is that we need to have control about the data. We need to have control, and we need to I always want to have everything under my control, and I want to have evidence. That's why sometimes I think legal teams, we are very reluctant to just like, okay, I'm gonna automatize this, and then I think I'm gonna lose control. So that's something also that gives us a little bit more, also because, as you all know, privacy authorities are very active authorities. So I always want to have these evidences, and sometimes it happens to me. I'm like, with this thing about the ROPA we were talking about, how can you, I don't see how can I automatize the ROPA. The way I see it is I need to go and have meetings with the business. I need to understand what they are working on. I need to understand what's the solution, the tool they are using that is processing personal data. And I don't understand how can I automatize this? Who is going to have these meetings? Who is going to understand these activities they are dealing with? Because so I see sometimes difficult, very difficult to automatize some of the privacy tasks, and yeah. So I think that's the reason why sometimes tech and legal we have these misunderstandings, let's say.
So I'll let you come back on that in a moment, Gal and Darius. Is there anything you'd like to add there, Shama, given the complexities of your work?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I'd be concerned about automating quite a few areas. TRAs is one in particular, because I think the conditions around the data export are just different for each.
So this is the transfer impact assessment, where you have to kind of assess the rules in a country to which you're exporting data. Yeah. Is that right?
That's right. So, assessing whether your recipient supplier, usually in a third country, can offer a sufficient level of protection for the data in compliance with the Schrems judgment. And we know that model clauses aren't alone going to be enough. So you need to add on top and have supplementary measures. And I just think the supplementary measures assessment will be different for each vendor, right? Some vendors will be subject to FISA, which was the problematic legislation in the US, and some won't. And these are things that you need to actually document in your transfer impact assessment. And I think that's still important, even though the recent judgments are sort of indicating it's very hard to come up with perfect supplementary measures that enable your export. But I still think it's important to document those mitigating actions in a TRA. And I think it has to be done case by case to demonstrate that you're advancing compliance with GDPR. Same with privacy impact assessments, same with legitimate interests. I mean, how do you automate an impact assessment? You have to weigh, what are the goals I'm trying to processing activity against the impact on the human being? And impact is such a broad concept under GDPR. It's not just about keeping personal data confidential and private. It encompasses, a right not to be discriminated against, rights of elderly people, rights of the disabled. That is like a limitless concept. So I have a strong belief that can only be done by a human being.
So do you want to, Darius or Gail, come back on that? Are there any kind of elements of those processes you feel could be automated? Are there ways you've seen efficiencies gained in those sorts of, with either ROPA, the data protection impact assessments, other kinds of data protection assessments that are required? Are those kind of trickier areas, or are there some things that you agree are the kind of limits to what you can automate?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I would agree with that, and that is come up to some issues, maybe with like TIAs, for example. It's very stringent in terms of the regulation that comes in, so you do need a good legal review and somebody that has experience with law to kind of review that. That being said, from my previous experience, there is some levels that you can automate it based on building legal and privacy frameworks within with the privacy legal team. So meeting a certain number of criteria, just simple yes or no questions that can put a particular, say, TIA through a certain workflow that if it was done manually from the start, reviewing every question, it might take twice as long versus potentially going, okay, I know if I get questions 1 to 10 answered yes or no, it's going to cut down the amount of time I'm going to need to review this because I've already got a guideline in which I've siloed off, say, some of those. So you can't fully automate everything, with some levels of privacy program management, but there's definitely quick wins that you can build upon through building privacy frameworks that can be supported with different privacy tools out there, such as, OneTrust is an example of some of the offerings they have.
So, Gail, do you want to say a bit about your own experience there, whether you feel that some of these more complex scenarios you can automate it around the edges, sort of thing, that it can help to an extent?
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree that not all of the things can be fully automated, but I think that a lot of the heavy lifting, if you think about the different privacy operation, can be done to some degree of automation, and then the rest can be done in a manual approach. And as Darius said, that heavy lifting can still save a lot of time. So TIA, totally agree. Maybe I can touch the ROPA side. So Shama mentioned that she saw some cases of companies handling that in the old-fashioned spreadsheet. I think that that approach can work. Most of the market, this is how they do it. I think that some problems regarding that can happen when we rely on the human memory, right? We rely on people to remember what data sources or what systems they are using, and then what PII can reside there. And the way we are doing that in an automated way is by doing like a real-time scanning 24/7 of all the data flow that is passing through the different systems in the company. And this is how we are able to, catch that in real time. Now, in order to do the processing context, what we have done is we leveraged AI to automatically analyze the privacy policies of the companies and to really understand the business context of how companies are using the data they collect. And with that, we essentially offer the company a few options that might be relevant to that data source in a sense of the type of processing activity, and then the customer can choose from that list. So this is a good example where we can, do the heavy lifting of, let's say, 50-60% of that, and then the customer can just pick, as Darius said, like yes or no questions, whether that is the right processing context or not. So this is like one specific example regarding ROPA.
Great, thank you. So we've got about 4 or 5 minutes now. We've had some questions from the audience. I'm going to go with, well, this is a kind of general question about DSARs here that might be fun. So this is not specifically on automation, but we've talked about subject access requests quite a lot. About this idea that you can charge in the GDPR for subject access requests that are repetitive or excessive. I think there's slightly different terminology used in the law itself. Has anyone ever had to do this? How do you come up with a fee? What do you think is a fair way of deciding upon that? Anyone like to come in on that? Is this perhaps not something anyone's dealt with yet?
I haven't directly dealt with a fee scenario, but a law, I believe, says that you're entitled to charge a reasonable fee. And I think at the local level, different regulators take a different view on what is a reasonable fee. So I think in the UK it's £10 and not over that. But then the interesting point about that question is, for DSARs that are repetitive or excessive, I mean, there is also the possibility of looking at whether you are exempt from responding if it's excessive. I think there is a exemption you can rely on. So that is something to consider.
Maybe that would be a better option in some cases. I think in the UK, and this is a very unpopular, even among people that deal with subject access requests every day, the UK is considering reintroducing the charge by default for subject access requests. There's a lot of worry there about the impact on data subject rights in that regard. So we'll do one more question from the audience. Is there a place in automation solutions for managing risk management among vendors and data flows? Gal, I think you touched upon this when you talked about the kind of privacy notice interpretation that your platform can do. Is there any kind of risk management element with your particular offering?
Yes, so as Darius mentioned at the beginning, there are other pillars that you can build on top of data mapping. One of them is third-party vendor risk assessment. So essentially any data source or any third party that you're identifying, there is the process of calculating the risk, whether it's sending them a questionnaire, and then, based on the answers, you can calculate the risk level, but it can also be done externally. So we partner with different companies in the market, and essentially there are ways of doing external check of the security side of any vendor, whether it's how he uses SSL and DNS, and how the servers, whether it's the cloud environment or things like that. So there is a way to do an external scan. And the questionnaire is supposed to give like an internal view based on the answers. And these two processes can also be automated, again, to some degree, because someone has to, vet it at the end of the process and decide whether this is a vendor that we want to proceed or not. But yeah, this is also something that can definitely be automated.
So it kind of does the legwork and then presents the manual team to make the final kind of sign off. So good example there of where the liability invoking element and the very complex decision making can be done by a human, but some of the less the more tedious work can be done automated. Well, thanks so much to all of you. That's all we've got time for on this panel. It's been a really interesting conversation, bit of challenge here and there, which I think is great. And yeah, I'll hand back over to Catherine now. Thanks all so much for your contributions.
Thank you, Rob. A fascinating session there. Data subject access requests, privacy impact assessments, transparency impact assessments. These are things that are not going away. And it's time for your business to leverage them for both customer and enterprise success. Automation, another interesting topic. There are some opportunities for automating privacy experiences, but it's one to be wary of. That's what the panelists sort of said all together, particularly when it comes to the diversity of global requirements popping up all over the data protection landscape. And it's one that will still require human review over any automated decision making. Thank you to all of our panelists and to our audience, as always, for submitting your amazing questions. We're going to take a short break now. Don't go too far. Now is the time, however, if you wish, to go grab a beverage of a stronger quality. Up next, we have a session on Brazil's General Data Protection Law, the LGPD. Stay tuned here on PrivSec Global.